The Indian Railways is often celebrated today as one of the largest railway networks in the world and a backbone of India's economy. However, its origin during the British colonial period tells a very different story. The railways, which began in the mid-19th century under the East India Company and later the British Crown, were not built for India's development, but rather to serve British economic and political interests. Far from being a gift, the railway system became one of the most effective tools used to drain India's wealth, facilitate resource exploitation, and tighten colonial control. The idea of railways in India was first floated in 1832, but it gained momentum only after the British realized their economic potential. The first passenger train ran on 16th of April 1853 between Bombay, now Mumbai, and Thane, covering a distance of 34 km. However, contrary to popular belief, this was not meant to modernize India or improve connectivity for Indians. The primary objectives were military control, quick troop movement to suppress uprisings like the 1857 revolt, resource extraction, easy transport of raw materials like cotton, jute, tea, coal, iron ore, and indigo to ports. Market expansion, flood Indian markets with British manufactured goods. Wealth drain, enable the rapid transfer of India's resources to Britain. The British called the railways a civilizing mission, but in reality, they were laying the foundation of an economic system designed to benefit Britain at India's expense. One of the most important mechanisms through which Britain drained India's wealth was the Railway Guarantee System, introduced in 1849. How it worked. Private British companies were invited to build railway lines in India. The Indian government, paid by Indian taxpayers, guaranteed them a 5% annual return on their investments. If the companies made less than 5% profit, the shortfall was paid from Indian revenues. If profits exceeded 5%, the British government kept the extra, not India. All machinery, rails, locomotives, and even skilled labor were imported from Britain, paid for by India. Companies were allowed to overcharge massively for construction and equipment. This system transferred huge sums of Indian wealth to British investors without them taking any risk. According to historian Mike Davis, it was private profit at public risk. By the 1870s, Britain had invested $350 million in Indian railways, but nearly all the money flowed back to Britain as guaranteed returns, salaries, imports, and profits. Famous nationalist and economic thinker Dadabhai Naoroji coined the term drain of wealth in his book Poverty and Un-British Rule in India, 1901. The railways played a central role in this drain. India paid for railway construction through heavy taxes. Railway contracts and profits enriched British companies. Raw materials were extracted cheaply from India and exported. Finished British goods were imported back into India at high prices. The system destroyed local industries and made India dependent on Britain. By 1900, India had over 25,000 km of railway lines, but their purpose was export-oriented, connecting mines, plantations, and raw material hubs directly to ports, not Indian towns or villages. One of the darkest chapters in Indian history is how the railways intensified the impact of famines instead of preventing them. How it happened. Before railways, during droughts, food shortages were mostly local. Nearby regions could balance them. With railways, grain was moved from famine-struck areas to ports for export, leaving locals to starve. The British insisted on maintaining exports even during crises to protect their profits. Beyond economics, the railways were also a political tool for the British. Troop movement. After the 1857 revolt, the railways allowed rapid deployment of British forces. Administrative control. Quicker communication helped strengthen colonial governance. Border security. Rail lines near frontiers, e.g. the Northwest Frontier Province, were built to counter Russian influence during the Great Game. In short, the railways consolidated British power while keeping India under tight control. While the British boasted about modernizing India, the financial burden fell entirely on Indians. High land taxes. Farmers were forced to pay exorbitant taxes, funding railway projects. Debt trap. India borrowed heavily from Britain to fund railway construction, creating long-term dependency. Economic inequality. While British investors thrived, Indian workers and taxpayers suffered. By 1910, India's annual payment to Britain in railway interest, salaries, and pensions exceeded $30 million, draining precious resources out of the country. Before British rule, India had thriving handloom, handicraft, and local trade networks. The railways disrupted these systems, imported British goods. Cheap British textiles and products reached Indian markets via rail, destroying local artisans. Resource extraction model. Instead of connecting Indian towns for mutual trade, railways connected mines and plantations to ports. Urban-rural divide. While British-controlled cities prospered, rural India plunged into poverty. The railways thus transformed India's economy from a self-sustaining network into a colonial extraction machine. By 1947, when India gained independence, the railways had expanded to over 53,000 km, making it one of the largest networks in the world. However, the structure and purpose of the network were deeply problematic. The British-built Indian railways are often glorified as a symbol of modernization, but history tells a harsher truth. They were never designed for India's benefit. As historian Mike Davis aptly put it, the Indian railways were the iron tracks of imperialism. They connected India not for her prosperity, but for her subjugation. Today, Indian Railways stands as a proud national institution, but its origins remind us of how infrastructure can be used as a tool of economic domination and colonial exploitation. Thanks for watching. If you found the video insightful, hit the like button and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video.